So about 9 months ago, I recorded a video on a Claude Code plan versus API, and I've noticed that a lot of people have been searching for this, especially since Claude banned using the OAuth token inside of third-party apps. And since the comment section in this video appreciated me going straight to the point, I'll do the same in this video, which is that you are better off going with the plan instead of the API. Even if you're new to agentic coding, vibe coding, even if you're just trying out Claude for the very first time, and especially if you're new to that, then you'll be wasting a lot of tokens. In this video, I also compare using cheaper models like Haiku 4.5 as well as Claude Sonnet 4.6. Overall, using their API is slightly cheaper, but I also explain why having a lower performance will end up costing you even more. All right, so let's dive straight to it. We're considering 44,000 tokens in a 5-hour window, and this is not official. This is not published from Claude, but it is a solid number discovered by the community. And if you don't understand what I mean about the 5-hour window, this is a window of time where your token will be revalidated. So if I start using Claude at 8 a.m., this means that till 1 p.m., I have 44,000 tokens to waste. If I did or did not use them, at 1 p.m., I'll get 44,000 more tokens to use. So we can say that in this time range, we have 88,000 tokens to use. And then if you multiply that by 25, which are the days per month that you would be using Claude, that is up to 2,200,000 tokens per month. Coding wise, this means that if you're working on a side project, if you're working on the weekends with a specific project, this should be enough. But if you're actively working on a project every day, it could get annoying hitting the 44,000 token limit every 5-hour window. But here's where I'd consider going down from Claude Opus 4.6 down to Claude Sonnet, or just upgrade to the 5x plan. Let me do a quick comment on this video since it was scripted before this post, but basically the change is that if your 5-hour window is between a peak hour, which is between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. Pacific time, you will likely burn through the tokens much faster. And this does not affect the overall weekly limits. And on the weekly limits, this is it. For the Pro plan, you get from 40 to 80 hours, and this is of processing. So considering a 5-hour window where around 1 to 2 hours of that window is Claude processing, this would sum up to from 3.5 million to 14 million tokens per month, which even by using 3 window limits is higher than the token amount you would have access to. The max 5x and max 20x plans are adjusted accordingly. And another TLDR on why you should use plans instead of the API is that you're paying for much more than just the model. You're paying for model switching, web search, Claude execution, Claude code access, and zero cognitive overhead, just because you don't need to deal with a lot of things that you would have to with an API. And still with this recent change, I believe plans are much better than the API, since honestly, this is affecting 7% of the users, which might be users that aren't using it the way it's supposed to be used. Just this weekend, I overheard a conversation where this guy was buying a API access to Claude Code from a black market, which was much cheaper than the actual Claude access. And the way people are selling these endpoints is by using the Claude plan to then distribute access to more people. That is absolutely not fair and is not the expected behavior for the overall users. So if you're not that guy, you shouldn't be bothered about these changes. One guy reported that while using the max 20x plan, with 3 prompts and less than 50% context, he reached 100% usage limit. As answered by Theric himself, this is just not possible if it's not a bug. So that's absolutely not expected because 20x plan is a lot of tokens. And this is probably something to do with the system prompting of Claude Code, something to do with the caching system, which is again a bug and not something you should expect to happen every single time. Now let's get back to the rest of the video. Okay, so till this point, we know exactly the amount of tokens we have for the Pro plan. And now let's distribute that through input and output tokens. And we do that because the pricing changes according to input or output. Claude estimated that a heavy context would be up to 75,000 input, but I honestly think a balanced coding is around 75 and a heavy context would be around 90% of input tokens. And that's because everything that you do, all the iterations, when you're at the maximum amount of context window, you're basically sending in everything that you've already talked to the LLM back to the LLM as an input. But that's from the top of my head. Let's just consider what Claude instructed us. Now that we have the percentages, let's distribute them into input and output for the Claude Opus 4.6. What that looks like for the balanced coding scenario is a monthly API cost of $26.40. What means that in comparison with the Pro plan, for any of these scenarios, while using Claude Opus 4.6, the API is always more expensive. Now, you might have seen the caching options here, and I have considered them. Since in Claude Words, in real Claude Code sessions, 90% plus of all tokens are cache reads. So redoing the second scenario, which was originally 26.4, with an aggressive caching falls down to 22.26. And if additionally we were to use the batch API, it would fall down to $11.14. But realistically, you won't wait 24 hours, especially for coding, which doesn't mean that the batch API always responds only after 24 hours, but coding-wise, you want things to be much faster. And honestly, I haven't ever tested the batch API for coding before, since even implementing caching for coding is kind of complex, especially inside of Claude, because it doesn't cache automatically like Gemini and OpenAI. You actually have to define a parameter that tells it to cache those set of tokens. If you're using Cursor, for example, it would be harder to calculate this since there's the plan cost for Cursor, but it also offers handling caching, although the community has complained a lot about the caching system, specifically for Claude models inside of Cursor. But a better question would be, what if we use cheaper models as APIs in comparison with the plans? Using the same exact amount of tokens as before, Haiku 4.5 would go down to $4.45 per month. Claude Sonnet would cost around $13.35 per month. And again, Opus 4.6 is still around $22.26 per month. So here's a table comparing API usage with cache, without cache, along with the Pro plan. Now, what does that look like in comparison with the other plans? Because we have the 5x plan as well as the max 20x plan listed down here. Oh, and I'm also considering $20 billed monthly, not annually, which would take the price down to $17. As for the max plan, it's around $100, and if you were to sign up for the max 20x, it would be $200 a month. So here is how all that looks like. Every time you see a negative here, that means the API pricing for that specific model is better. And whenever you see a plus, that means you're better off using the plan. Comparing Pro with Max is kind of silly because, the Max plan gives you 5x the amount of tokens, but you're paying 5x more. So the price here is just being multiplied by 5, so we don't see any variation of it being more worth to use the API over the plan or the plan over the API. Where we see a significant change is in the Max 20x plan, where we are paying double the price from Max 5x, but we're getting 4 times the amount of tokens. And here's where it becomes much more interesting to use the plan over the API, specifically for the Claude Sonnet 4.6 version. The best model available is always better just going with the plan. Now, if you're taking things a bit more seriously, even if you're in the learning phase, you'll likely use more of those 5-hour windows from Claude. So from 8 a.m. to 6.1 p.m., this is equivalent to 132,000 tokens. And I think I briefly mentioned this in the beginning of the video, but if you're just starting out, you don't know how to provide the right context for Claude Code to fetch or do whatever you want. For example, if a beginner vibe coder / agentic coder wanted to add someone to the database, they would say something like, add the person X to my database, blatantly as that. Depending on the way you have the project set up, Claude might not know what is the project. Is it a Next.js project? Is it using Python? Are you using Java? And even if you have Next.js, how are you setting up the database? Are you using a ORM? Is that ORM Prisma? And where are the files for Prisma? So during all this process of fetching for context, it's just wasting you a lot of tokens. And that's why I constantly see inside of X people complaining that the max 5x plan gives people a low amount of tokens, or that their max 20x expires tokens daily. That's insane. That's absurd. Like, that's out of this world for me. I have probably reached the max 5x plan's token limit in that 5-hour limit window twice in my life, after using it now for over 8 months. And since I'm already out of topic here, don't listen to people telling you that you need to install all the skills available, that you need to have an MCP for this, for that, for everything, because all that is being added added to the context window of your LLM, which just costs you more token and arguably is what is taking you to reach this maximum limit for these plans. But now if we're using 3 windows as an example, that means that Claude Sonnet API is not worth it anymore, since you would be spending up to $3.76 more in comparison to the plan. And the difference while using the Opus API is basically twice the amount you'll be paying if you take the API route. Another point I like to talk about are the benchmarks. This is because, well, I'm pretty cheap. And if I were watching this video, I'd say, okay, then I'm going to use the Haiku API forever. Since, I mean, it's half of the price that we pay for the Pro plan. But we can see the problem with that down here. First of all, Haiku isn't made as a model for coding. It does help with coding, but in a sense of doing simple tasks. Handling a screenshot, for example, is something Haiku does pretty well. Honestly, I think Haiku was built for this. It's built so we can use Claude for Chrome. I don't think it's the default model right now because it's not Haiku 4.6, but as soon as they optimize Haiku, it should then become the default model for Claude for Chrome, just because, I mean, it's built for that, right? It's a cheaper model, it responds faster, but it doesn't think as well as the other ones. What that means is that even though this is a much cheaper model, you'll be iterating and wasting more tokens to get to the same results that you would get with less token usage from a more powerful model. And by the way, to be completely honest, if you're a new user and you're not aiming to learn how to use Claude Code specifically, just go with Codex. OpenAI just has cheaper models that perform pretty well, especially better than if you're going for Claude Haiku 4.5, for example. If you're a developer, if you're already building something, you're an entrepreneur, consider going for the Claude Opus 4.6 while using Claude Code. And by the way, this changes a lot and can change a lot in a few weeks from now even. So make sure to check the date of this video and to also check benchmarks on which is the current best LLM available. But as for someone that's been using AI to code since ChatGPT came out, Claude has always been the very best. I think maybe for 1 month when OpenAI had a better model launched, in that month it was better, but Claude soon launched an even better model. I think it was the Sonnet 3.5, I'm not sure, but at least up till this day, Anthropic has been the very best. So yeah, if you have a different opinion on this, if you saw a different calculation that I didn't see, if there was a variable here that I got wrong, please let us know down in the comments section just to make sure that we're actually getting the most precise data on this topic. That's it for today. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Till then.